So today on the deep dive, we're really getting into the whole controversy around Tanez, which you could translate loosely as an elegant dream tale.
Right.
We'll look at bits from the story itself, the dream part, and then the violent attack that followed, targeting the publisher's president.
And Fukasawa's own pretty unusual views on the emperor, too, right?
Exactly. We've got three main sources guiding us. First, actual excerpts from Nez, just to give you a feel for how surreal and, frankly, provocative it was about the imperial family.
Then there's Fui's work, the 1961 Winter Fuji Mutant incident. That gives us the rundown on the right-wing reaction and the attack on the publisher, Tuate's.
And finally, we've got pieces from Wei's own diary, something like "This is my motherland, huh?" diary. And that's where we see his really critical take on the whole imperial system.
Okay.
So our mission here is to figure out why. Why did this strange dream story provoke such an extreme, violent response? What does it tell us about Japan in the 1960s?
And the whole free speech angle, too.
Yeah.
Especially that chrysanthemum taboo, the unwritten rule about not criticizing the emperor.
That's it. It really makes you think about how societies handle their biggest symbols,
Definitely.
So let's step into the dream. It starts with the main character on a bus going to Shibuya. There's this vibe of, maybe revolution, social chaos.
Some kind of upheaval.
But then it just swerves hard into the surreal when he gets to the imperial palace.
Right. It's pure dream logic from there. Things happen, and the protagonist just accepts them. No real surprise.
And it gets really bizarre. He sees the crown prince and princess beheaded with his own axe. His
own axe? Wow.
Yeah. Then the emperor and empress show up, headless. And the empress dowager is there too, but she starts yelling these incredibly crude insults in the A's dialect.
Like what kind of insults?
Oh, like Ipzi and really vulgar stuff you just wouldn't associate with, royalty. Especially her. That contrast is so jarring.
Absolutely. That kind of earthy base language in that incredibly revered setting.
Right.
That's clearly deliberate. It's meant to shock. The sacred meets the profane head on.
And you gotta remember the timing. This story comes out right smack in the middle of the Michi boom.
Ah, right. After Crown Prince Akihito married Michiko Shutia, the commoner. Massive public fascination.
Huge. And Fukasawa even uses her nickname in the story. So you've got this national fairy tale happening, everyone's obsessed, and then this story drops. Talk about poking the bear.
Exactly. That public affection for the new crown princess just made the story's violence against the imperial family feel even more offensive, more transgressive to a lot of people. It flew right in the face of this image everyone was celebrating.
And through all this weirdness, the main character is just strangely calm. He sees a nude dancer waiting for the bus earlier, doesn't blink, the beheadings, the insults. He just rolls with it.
Yeah, that detachment is interesting. Is Fukasawa commenting on, societal apathy?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's just a way to highlight how absurd everything is. The dream framework lets him show these shocking things without, directly saying, I endorse this.
The ending is weird, too. He sees some surreal fireworks, thinks about death, writes a death poem, seems to shoot himself with a pistol, and then just wakes up. The last lines are about him grabbing his watch, glad it was awake while he was dreaming. It's this sudden snap back to normal after all that fantasy and violence. Leaves you scratching your head.
That whole cycle, dream, revolution, imperial downfall, then back to reality. It really opens the door to interpretation, doesn't it? Is he mocking revolution, saying power is fleeting, it feels deliberately ambiguous?
Yeah, and people definitely read it differently. Some, like Udon, saw it as satire, maybe criticizing revolution itself, or how systems like the imperial one can dehumanize people.
Okay, so a political read.
Right. But others, like Uji, even Oceanic, had their own takes. But for a lot of people, the main reaction was just offense, like a sacred line was crossed. What does that say about satire when people can't even agree if that's what it is?
That's a key point. Satire pushes boundaries, makes you uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But did Fukasawa push too far for Japanese society at that time, especially regarding the emperor? That seems to be the crux of it.
Which is a perfect lead-in to part 2. Fukasawa's own diary, his personal thoughts. And it's wild that who you mentions even
Mishima.
Really? Yeah, considered this diary the best recent criticism of the emperor? Why would Mishima, of all people, think that? He had his own very strong ideas about the emperor.
Well, Mishima was complicated. He revered tradition, yes, but he was also fiercely critical of modern Japan. Maybe he saw Fukasawa's bluntness, however strange, as refreshing. A break from all the usual polite talk. It might have appealed to his own, iconoclastic side.
Fukasawa definitely didn't mince words. He was openly against the crown prince marrying a commoner, believed in bloodline marriage for the imperial family.
Okay, that sounds more traditionalist.
But wait for the reason. It's not about superior blood or anything. He thought wise emperors, smart ones, would be unfortunate.
Unfortunate how?
Because they might start questioning their role, have doubts. He honestly seemed to think people who didn't think too deeply about their life's purpose were better suited to be emperor. It's such a cynical take on leadership.
Wow. Yeah, cynical is the word. He's basically saying ignorance is bliss, or maybe ignorance is stability for the imperial line. Forget intellectual leadership.
He goes on, calls past and present emperors. They're foolish people, huh? Just casually. Because they didn't think about life's meaning or even how their own money worked. It's so dismissive of figures usually treated with total reverence.
It completely undermines that traditional image of the emperor as this wise, almost divine figure, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He's bringing them right down to earth, viewing them in this really mundane way.
And then he outlines his plan, his vision for future emperors. Keep the bloodline marriages going to intentionally produce people of weaker intellect.
Seriously, he advocated for that.
Yeah. He was actually disappointed about the marriage to Michiko Shuta because it messed up his plan for this. Physically and mentally different imperial family. He described them looking like peeled shrimp or mantis shrimp. It's such a bizarre, kind of disturbing image.
There's a troubling, almost eugenic quality to that, isn't there? Intentionally breeding for intellectual decline.
It's deeply unsettling. And he wraps it up by saying, more bloodline marriage was his it's an utmost love for my motherland. It's just a warped kind of patriotism built on this idea of a deliberately weakened imperial line.
So if you connect that, thinking back to the beheadings, the crude insults, maybe the story was his exaggerated, dreamlike way of showing that desire. To strip away the imperial mystique, fitting with his idea of a less mentally sharp emperor.
It starts to make a kind of twisted sense, doesn't it? Which brings us right to part 3. The fury and the fallout, this Sekis incident. Kosia's account really shows how intense things got after the story appeared in the Xenotiri in December 1960.
Right, the publication was the trigger, but things escalated fast.
Immediately, right-wing groups were all over it. Protests against Fukasawa, protests against the publisher, demands for apologies. Even the Imperial Household Agency, the Ila, protested. The government cabinet apparently considered suing, but didn't in the end. Still, the fact that the agency got involved shows how sensitive this was.
Oh, absolutely. Government considering legal action over a short story. That speaks volumes about how seriously they took it.
But the pressure kept mounting. Groups like the Greater Japan Patriotic Party, they really rammed things up, apparently even intimidating staff at Pool. These groups had real teeth back then.
Yeah, that highlights the kind of power and influence these right-wing organizations could exert in 1960s Japan. They could really make life difficult for people and institutions.
Ichi seemed to buckle, at first anyway. They put out an apology, replaced the editor-in-chief, moved staff around, probably hoping to calm things down.
But it wasn't enough for the extremists, was it? And then that other novel came out. Kushi's A Political Youth Dies.
Right, with a character based on Oz, the guy who assassinated Ichimpol. That just poured gasoline on the fire for the right-wing groups. The whole situation was incredibly tense.
You can feel the pressure building.
And then, February 1st, 1961, this 17-year-old kid, a right-wing youth connected to the Chumo, breaks into the home of All-Value's president, Utu. Shimanaka wasn't home, thankfully.
But it was still a direct attack on the publisher's leadership.
Yeah. The youth demanded to see the president. Couldn't.
Yep.
So he stabbed Shimanaka's wife. She was the daughter of a famous scholar, a Won, and the housekeeper, a 50-year-old woman named Kuteryu. She died from her injuries.
God, that's horrific. An innocent housekeeper killed. It just shows the awful human cost of it all.
Absolutely brutal. The kid surrendered the next morning. His motive? Chillingly simple. The author is bad, but the president who makes money selling it is worse.
Wow.
And he had "Long Live the Emperor" written on his handkerchief. The leader of the day, Nippon Aikokuta, got arrested but was let go later, no charges.
That whole event must have sent shockwaves through Japan. The media, free speech, everything.
Totally. You saw self-censorship about the imperial family really ramp up after that. Mudio put out these confusing statements, apologies mixed with defenses of free speech, probably didn't please anyone.
And that incident later with the Degathese, the science of thought, that really shows the chilling effect, doesn't it?
Yeah, the publisher halted a special issue about the emperor system and actually let right-wing figures and police review it beforehand. The contributors walked out, saw it as a total betrayal of, intellectual freedom.
A major capitulation.
And Fukasawa himself. He was clearly deeply affected. He refused to let Shinchei be republished while he was alive. That says a lot about the burden he must have carried after that.
It's worth noting, too, that even on the right, not everyone approved of the attack itself.
Right.
Criticizing the violence against an innocent woman, the reaction wasn't completely uniform.
True. And for Dota, the long-term damage was real. Labor problems down the line, eventually being sold to the Yomiuri Shimbun newspaper. That incident left a deep scar, no question. On the company and on Japanese publishing overall, this whole deep dive just lays bare this moment where art, politics, and violence collided with tragic results.
It's a powerful reminder of how fragile free expression can be when it confronts deeply held cultural values, especially during times of change.
So let's try and pull the key takeaways together. First, Osa was this incredibly controversial piece using surreal satire to poke at sensitive stuff, the imperial family, social change in 1960s Japan.
Right, and Fukasawa himself, as we saw in his diary, had these deeply unconventional, critical views about the emperor in the whole system.
Then there's the violent reaction, the Usi incident, which absolutely had a chilling effect. Freedom of speech took a hit. That chrysanthemum taboo got stronger, more self-censorship in the media.
And finally, the whole thing just reveals the incredibly volatile political atmosphere back then and the real power these right-wing groups had to shape what people talked about or didn't talk about. It really highlights the power symbols hold and how intense the backlash can be when they're challenged.
Okay, so here's something to chew on as we wrap up. Think about satire's power, how art can challenge the biggest norms in society. But then, think about the danger when that challenge is met not with argument but with violence. How does this story from 1960s Japan echo in today's debates about free speech, about where the lines are? What does it tell you about those unspoken boundaries that exist in any society, and what happens when someone crosses them?